When you work with spreadsheets, have you ever really looked at all of those numbers and all of that data and decided that it would have been a really great idea if you could somehow visually represent what that data means? Well, one of the easiest ways to do that is to create a chart. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and today we're going to look at Google Sheets and how to create a chart. As we look at our little example spreadsheet today, we can see that is information about ABC Company, and it's the profits basically for each quarter and then for the year as well. So as you look at column A, here we have the different regions, and there are 5 regions: Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, Northwest, and Southwest. And then starting with column B, we have each one of the 4 quarters. In column F, we have the regional totals for the year. And then in row 8, we also have the quarter totals to see how the company was doing. And then, of course, in F8, we have the all year total. But what is a little more difficult to see, unless you really like numbers, is which one of these particular districts or regions had a good year because they increased each time in a very consistent manner. Which one of these regions was just on top the whole time? Which one was just sort of in the middle and they didn't really increase or decrease a whole lot, but they also were fairly consistent in their efforts? Well, you can't really tell from here, can you? And so what would help us is a visual representation of those numbers. And the easiest way to do that is to create a chart. Some of the charts are going to be a better representation of the data than others of the charts, but it takes very few steps to create a chart that will make a huge difference in our understanding of these regions, the quarters, and ABC Company as a whole. To get started, we want to select the information that will show up in our chart. So I'm going to start here in A2, and we know that we want to select the region, the first, second, third, fourth quarter. What we want to be careful to not select is anything that has to do with totals, because those will really skew the chart in general. So we'll come down and select each row that represents a region, but again, be careful not to select the quarter totals here in row 8. And then we can go to Insert, which is the 4th choice here in the menu bar. And we're going to go down to the second section of this drop-down menu and select the first choice, Chart. And automatically, Sheets has determined what might be a really good representation of our data. And so we have this chart that is just right here in the middle of our screen. And on the right, we see a chart editor that lets us decide how we want to set up this particular chart. So first of all, let's look to see how it is set up right now. And it has given us the different column headings for first, second, third, fourth quarter, which is very helpful. And then below that, we have the legend. So we know that fourth quarter is going to be in green, third quarter in gold, second quarter in red, and first quarter in blue. And as we look at the chart itself, it's set up so that it is a stacked column chart. And I know that because as I come to the right, the chart type says stacked column chart. It has each different quarter stacked on top of the next quarter. And so with that, we can see that Southwest has outperformed the others. Southeast has struggled the most. And then it kind of gives us an idea that Southeast started off at kind of a deficit here with the first quarter, that it didn't do nearly as well as the other regions. And then the other regions have really just kept on going since that first quarter. Southeast looks pretty consistent. It's just that it's a lot lower than the other regions. Now that we've seen that stacked column chart, let's look at some of the possibilities here, because first of all, we can change the chart type. We can decide if we want the chart stacked or not, and what kind of stacking we could add. We can make sure that our data range is correct, and yes it is. It's A2 through E7. And then we have some other choices here that we may or may not want to look at. But for right now, we have a first quarter series, a second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Those are all correct, but we could add series even. And then we have some other choices down here at the bottom that we may decide to add or remove. Well, let's go back up to the top, because the stacked column chart, maybe we want some other kind of chart. So let's just look at the possibilities. We'll click on the drop down here. And that is what is suggested first, the stacked column. But to the right of that, we have a column chart. Let's click on that. And so now we have individual columns that show how the different quarters played out for the different regions. And you can see that Southeast made a lot of progress each time, whereas most of the others kind of stayed within a certain region and didn't really advance or lose, except maybe Northeast had the most movement with its numbers. Well, that was the column chart. Now another one that was suggested is this stacked area chart. We can click on it. And so we get sort of this interesting comparison. So here's Northeast, Southeast, etc. Some people really like this. To me, it's a little bit harder to determine what those numbers are. And then it also suggested that instead of columns going up and down, we might want to look at the stacked bar chart, which goes from left to right. So basically the same information we saw with the column chart, except, well, at a 90-degree angle. And it just depends on your data and what you are trying to show, and how the people that you are going to show this to understand numbers and charts as to which one you might want to choose. Well, let's go back here, because those are the 4 suggested types, but we might decide to venture away from that and look at a line chart, for example. So if I click on line chart, line charts really kind of show trends or movement over time. And while they do that, to me it kind of looks like spaghetti. It's a little harder to figure out where the different lines are, and if they cross over, is that really needed? Well, maybe. It depends on, again, what you are trying to see. All right, now besides the line chart, and there are several different kinds of line charts here. That was kind of the basic line chart. And we could even have a smooth line chart, which just kind of has nice curves to it instead of straight lines. Or we could even have a combo chart. Now, a combo chart is interesting in that you usually use a combination of a column chart and a line chart. So it's comparing the first quarter with the other quarters. That can be very helpful. I'm not sure that it really displays our information in the best way. We already saw an area chart. I'll show one more here. I'm not sure that that's what we're looking for either. So let's come down. We already looked at the column charts. The 100% stacked column chart is sort of interesting. Let me click on it. Because what it says is whatever each region made, that's 100% of what they made. Now, it doesn't compare them to other regions. So it's by percent rather than by actual numbers. In that case, then, Midwest, Northwest, Southwest almost have identical percents for the quarters as you go through. Southeast really made a lot of gains here in that fourth quarter. And you can kind of see then who has made the gains and when they've made them. However, if I want to really compare who's brought in the most money, well, that's not what this does. As I come down then, we have the different bar charts. And of course, again, these are going to be just a 90-degree version of the column charts. So here are stacked bar charts. And I think we have a stacked, yes, the 100% stacked bar chart. And it may be that the horizontal bars make more sense than the columns. Again, it's how do you want to represent your information. Coming on down, the pie chart simply shows that the entire amount that the company received for a year is what this pie is, and then who contributed the most to that pie. So obviously Southwest contributed almost 32%, whereas Southeast didn't even contribute 8%. And so if you're looking for that kind of a comparison, that would be a good chart for you. Coming on down, kind of a variation of the pie chart is the donut chart. It just puts a hole in the middle. And then we also have this 3D pie chart, which kind of sets it on its side. And that's actually a donut as well, so interesting that they call that a pie chart. Let me go back to the pie and then try the 3D pie chart. So it depends on how you start and then put in the 3D as to which one that actually is. Now we also then have, besides kind of the basic kinds of charts, there's scatter charts. Again, this would be for more like scientific data of some kind. It's not anything that is very representative of what we would need to do. And then there's also the map charts. These are geographic charts. They require no more than 3 columns generally, and of course Northeast region doesn't mean anything to sheets. We would need to say something like New York, Massachusetts, something like that for those kinds of charts to make much sense. Below that, we also have then other. And so we have a waterfall chart. And some of these really just don't work, but a waterfall chart. We could go to the, as we come down here, the histogram chart. But having said that, you have to look at the quarters and kind of try to figure out how all of that works. But it's not really what we are interested in today. We also then have a radar chart, which is, again, very specific in the kinds of information that you would want to use for that and for our company. No, not really. The gauge chart, this will work, but boy, is that confusing. So we have first quarter for the different 5 regions, and then it starts second quarter, and it shows you all these gauges. This really doesn't represent the data in any kind of way that would help, I think. So let's see what else we have here. This scorecard chart really only shows about one region at one time, so that doesn't work very well for us. This candlestick chart is really used with stocks and, say, hourly readings or daily readings or whatever of a stock, what the first price was, what the last price was, that kind of thing. Not anything that we would use for a quarter. Org chart is great, but not for what we need. The tree map chart, again, is not something that we can use today. The timeline chart actually requires dates in column A, so we can't use that as well. And then there's a table chart, which would basically just show us what we have now, so that's not very helpful either. Well, let's go back to then, as I look at all of these different charts, let's just go back to our stacked column chart. Now, below the chart type, we can determine the kind of stacking. So this is the standard, and then, of course, the 100%, which we saw as its own chart type, if we would like to do that. If we go to none, well, then it's just a regular column chart without the stacking. So that was also a chart type. We'll go to stacking, but we'll just say standard. And again, then we have the data range double check. Now that we've made our basic selections for setup, let's go back to the chart editor and to the right where we can customize what we have. So let's click on customize, and we can click the little arrows here to the left of the different kinds of things we can customize. So when I click on the arrow for chart style, notice that I could change the background color, and each one of these has a gallery of colors. So background color, chart border color, or I can leave it the way it is. I could even change the font if I want to do that. For maximize, I could click on it and make the columns larger or not. I can make them 3D or not. 3D sometimes doesn't print as well as it looks on a monitor, so kind of keep that in mind. We could also look at the chart and access titles. So in this case, the chart title, let's see, if I have a drop down, I could have a subtitle, I can have an access title, and I don't really want for second, third, fourth quarter for my title. What I really want is just ABC Company. And again, I can change that title font and size if I want to do that. I can change the color, and I can even make it bold, italics, center it. Maybe I want to center it instead of left align it. For the series, we can say, well, what kind of a line do we want to add here for the line colors, for example? So let me click on one and let's see if we can add it in. So for the series, we could apply a line color and apply it to all series. And it's the border color around each one of those series. Below that, we could format a data point if we wanted to do that, put in error bars, data labels, put in trend lines. We could do some of that data labels. And very quickly then we get the numbers that showed up on the spreadsheet. Let's scroll down a little bit, and as we come down we can see the legend. Now the legend is just automatically at the top, but I could put it at the bottom, which that's kind of where a lot of people are putting it these days. I could put it on the left, which I don't think people look for a legend on the left necessarily. I could put it on the right, but probably bottom or top are about the best maybe. And I could change that legend font and point size and color. The horizontal axis, I can again make some changes to it if I need to. The vertical axis, if I need to make changes to it. And then grid lines and ticks, and let me just kind of show how that works. let's say that we do have the major grid lines on, we can take them off. And so now we don't have any lines here. And then I can also change the grid line color if I want to do that. The minor grid lines, I can add them and change that grid line color. Major and minor ticks. When I say major ticks, it's really these little lines right here that kind of go over the line that shows the axis. So let me change my grid line colors here a bit to something much lighter. And so now you can see those ticks very easily. And they are another thing that you may want to think about. So there's a lot here that you may decide that you want to use to customize what you have done. To resize the chart, we can simply find the chart handles, the sizing handles, and click and drag in or out. When you look at your chart, you have 3 dots in the upper right. When you click on those, they give you a little menu to edit the chart, delete it. You can download it as a picture. You can publish it. You could copy it someplace, or you can also move it to its own sheet. Now, when you move it to its own sheet, it shows up nicely, much bigger, but in the upper right, you have a little toolbar where you have the same options to copy the chart, edit, publish, download, or delete. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, and you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.